The face staring back at me in the mirror wasn't mine anymore. I dragged the makeup sponge across my cheek one more time, smudging brown and grey into the lines around my eyes. My hands that had signed billion-dollar contracts, hands that had built an empire from absolutely nothing, now trembled as I rubbed dirt into my silver hair. 75 years old, and I was about to become homeless. Well, not really, but my sons didn't need to know that. I stepped back from the vanity in my master bathroom, all Italian marble and gold fixtures, and examined my transformation. The woman looking back at me was unrecognizable. Hollow cheeks, matted hair, clothes I'd pulled from a donation bin, stained and torn. I looked desperate, broken, exactly like someone who had lost everything. And in a way, I was about to find out if I had. My name is Beatrice Harlow, and I built Harlow Industries from the ground up. 50 years ago, I was a single mother with 3 baby boys and exactly $47 to my name. I started by cleaning offices at night. Then I noticed how much those companies wasted on cleaning supplies. So I bought in bulk, repackaged, and sold to them cheaper. One office became 10, 10 became 100. Within a decade, I wasn't just selling supplies, I was manufacturing them. Within 2 decades, Harlow Industries was the 3rd largest facilities management corporation in North America. I did that. Me. The woman everyone said would amount to nothing. But success is a strange teacher. It teaches you what you're capable of achieving. It also teaches you what money does to people, how it twists them, changes them, reveals who they really are underneath the pretense of family and love. My 3 sons grew up with everything I never had. Private schools, Ivy League universities, trust funds that could feed a small nation. I told myself I was giving them opportunities, but somewhere along the way, I stopped asking myself an important question. What kind of men was I raising? Now, at 75, I was stepping down as CEO. The company would go to one of my sons. The mansion, the properties, the stock portfolio, the vacation homes, everything. My entire life's work would pass to the next generation. But which son deserved it? I had 3 months to decide, and I'd spent those months watching them, really watching. And what I saw terrified me. My oldest, Christopher, was 47 now, an investment banker with a corner office in Manhattan and a collection of luxury cars worth more than most people's houses. He was smart, ruthless in business, exactly the kind of shark you'd want running a corporation. But when I had lunch with him last month, he'd spent 45 minutes on his phone, barely looking at me. When I asked about his family, he said, "Fine," without elaborating. When I mentioned that his younger brother was struggling, he rolled his eyes and said, "Lucas needs to grow up and stop playing with his little art projects." My middle son, Vincent, was 44, and he'd gone into politics. City councilman now, with his eyes on a congressional seat. Everything about Vincent was calculated for optics. His wife, his kids, his carefully curated social media presence. It was all a brand. Last Christmas, he'd asked me to donate $2 million to his campaign, then barely stayed for dinner. He left early for a networking event, kissing me on the cheek and promising to visit more. That was 8 months ago. I'd seen him twice since then, both times when he needed something. And then there was Lucas. Lucas, my baby boy, now 41 years old. Lucas, who had disappointed me more than I could count. Lucas, who dropped out of business school to become a sculptor. Lucas, who worked as a mechanic to pay his rent because his art didn't sell. Lucas, who drove a 15-year-old Honda and lived in a studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood. Lucas, who I'd caught myself feeling embarrassed about when my wealthy friends asked what my sons did. Christopher's in investment banking, Vincent's in politics, and Lucas, well, Lucas is finding himself. That's what I'd say with a tight smile that meant, please don't ask more questions. But here's what I'd noticed about Lucas. When I called, he answered. When I needed help setting up my new phone, he drove 40 minutes to show me, even though he had to work the next morning. When it was my birthday, he came over and cooked dinner himself, something simple, spaghetti carbonara, because he knew I was tired of fancy restaurant food. He didn't have money to buy expensive gifts, so he made me things, a wooden box with my initials carved in it. a clay sculpture of my mother's hands, based on an old photograph I'd shown him once. I kept these treasures in my bedroom, hidden away, because I didn't know how to explain to myself why they meant more than the designer purses and diamond bracelets my other son's secretaries picked out. 3 sons, 3 very different men, and I was about to find out who they really were. Before I tell you which son betrayed me the worst, I want to welcome you to the family. If you believe character matters more than a bank account, please subscribe and like this video. It helps us spread the truth. The plan came to me 3 weeks ago, during a sleepless night. I'd just had dinner with all 3 sons, a rare occasion when everyone was in town. I'd watched them interact. Christopher spent the evening bragging about a deal he'd closed, barely letting anyone else speak. Vincent kept checking his watch, worried about missing a donor event. Lucas sat quietly sketching on a napkin, occasionally asking Vincent's kids about school. At one point, Christopher made a joke about homeless people near his office building. Security has to chase them away every morning. They're terrible for business. Clients don't want to see that. Vincent laughed. We're trying to pass an ordinance to clear them out of the downtown area before the convention. Can't have that kind of element when we're trying to attract tourism. I looked at Lucas. He wasn't laughing. He was looking at his brothers with something I couldn't quite read. Disappointment? Disgust? They're human beings, Lucas said quietly. They're someone's father, someone's mother. Christopher rolled his eyes. Here we go. The bleeding heart speech. They're not decorations you can just remove because they're inconvenient, Lucas continued, his voice steady. They're people who fell on hard times. That could be any of us. It could never be me, Christopher said, smirking. I actually applied myself. The table went quiet after that. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about that exchange. It crystallized something I'd been feeling for years, but couldn't articulate. My successful sons had learned how to make money, but had they learned how to be human? There was only one way to find out. I would become one of the people they so casually dismissed. I would strip away every advantage, every marker of wealth and status and power. I would approach them as a stranger in need, and I would see what they did, not as my sons, as men. It took 2 weeks to plan. I couldn't just dress down and hope they wouldn't recognize me. I needed to transform completely. So I hired a makeup artist, told her I was preparing for a play, and had her teach me theatrical aging techniques, how to make my skin look weathered and dirty, how to grey my hair with powder, how to use shadow to make my face look gaunt. I practiced in secret, in the guest house on my property where no one would see. I also prepared the legal documents. This wasn't just a test, it was an audition. I had my lawyers draw up 3 new versions of my will, one for each son, depending on who passed. The others would get a basic inheritance, enough to be comfortable, but nothing compared to the bulk of my fortune. And if all 3 failed, well, I'd already identified 3 charities that would receive everything instead. I was ready to disinherit my own children if they proved themselves unworthy. That's how seriously I took this. Today was the day. I finished my makeup, tied my grey hair into a messy knot, and put on the clothes. A stained coat that smelled like thrift store mothballs, torn pants, shoes with holes in the soles. I'd been wearing them around my guest house for days, adding authentic wear and tear. I looked in the mirror one final time. Beatrice Harlow, CEO, philanthropist, mother. She was gone. In her place stood someone invisible, someone people would cross the street to avoid, someone her own sons might not recognize. My driver, Marcus, no relation to my son, who'd been with me for 20 years and was one of the few people in on this plan, drove me to the edge of downtown in an unmarked sedan. I'd told my assistant I was taking a personal weekend. No one expected to hear from me. Mrs. Harlow, Marcus said, as I prepared to get out of the car. Are you sure about this? I looked at him. Marcus had driven all 3 of my boys to school when they were young. He'd watched them grow up. He knew them almost as well as I did. I have to know, I said simply. He nodded, understanding more than I'd said. I'll be parked 2 blocks away. You have the emergency phone in your pocket. If anything goes wrong, I'll call. I stepped out onto the sidewalk and immediately felt the city differently. People's eyes slid past me. A woman with a stroller actively moved away. The Beatrice Harlow I'd been yesterday would have walked these streets with confidence, her presence commanding respect and attention. Today, I was a ghost. It was surprisingly painful. I made my way toward my first destination, the financial district, where Christopher worked. His office was in one of those gleaming glass towers that you see on postcards. I'd been there 100 times, of course. I'd even sat in on board meetings, back when I was more involved in diversifying my investments. But I'd never approached it like this. From the outside, from below. The morning sun glinted off the building's facade, almost blinding. I positioned myself near the entrance to the underground parking garage, where I knew Christopher parked his silver Porsche 911. He was a creature of habit, always arrived between 8:15 and 8:30 a.m. I sat down on the concrete, my back against the wall, and waited. Other employees walked past me, streaming into the building. Not one person looked at me directly. A few dropped their eyes. One young man fumbled in his pocket and tossed some change in my direction without breaking stride. The coins clattered on the pavement. I left them there. At 8:23, I heard it, the purr of an expensive engine. The Porsche descended into the garage, and I stood up, my heart hammering. This was it, the first test. I timed it perfectly. As Christopher emerged from his car, carrying his leather briefcase and wearing a suit that probably cost more than my first car, I approached. "Excuse me, sir," I said, making my voice rough, desperate. "I haven't eaten in 2 days. Could you spare anything? Anything at all?" He didn't even look at me, just kept walking, his expensive shoes clicking on the concrete. "Please," I said, following a few steps. "I'm so hungry. Just a few dollars." That's when he stopped and turned. For a moment I thought he recognized me. His eyes passed over my face, and something flickered there. But no, it wasn't recognition. It was irritation. "How did you get in here?" he demanded. "This is private property. I just need help," I said, reaching out a trembling hand. "Please, I'm a mother." "Security!" Christopher's voice echoed through the garage. "Security!" 2 uniformed guards appeared from around the corner, and Christopher pointed at me like I was something he'd found on his shoe. "Get this trash away from my car," he said, his voice cold and clipped. "I don't know how she got past the checkpoint, but I want her removed immediately. And check the cameras. I want to know how this happened, so it doesn't happen again." Trash. He called me trash. One of the guards, a younger man who looked embarrassed, approached me gently. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "I'm so sorry," I said, backing away, my voice cracking with genuine emotion now. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bother anyone." "You didn't bother me," the guard said quietly. "But you can't be here. Come on, I'll walk you out." As he led me away, I glanced back. Christopher had already forgotten me. He was checking his phone, scrolling through emails, his face illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. His own mother had begged him for help, and he'd called security to remove the trash. I thought that was the worst of it. I thought Christopher's casual cruelty was the bottom, but what Vincent did next broke my heart completely. I took a bus. A bus! I couldn't remember the last time I'd been on public transportation, to the neighborhood where Vincent held his constituent meetings. Every Saturday, he ran an office hours event at a trendy cafe where local voters could come talk to him about their concerns. It was great publicity. Vincent always made sure photographers were there. The cafe was called Common Grounds, which I found darkly ironic. There was nothing common about it. $15 artisanal sandwiches, $20 salads, coffee drinks with names I couldn't pronounce. Vincent was set up at a table near the window, shaking hands and smiling broadly for the camera. His assistant stood nearby, carefully managing the line of people waiting to speak with him. I waited until there was a gap in the line, then approached his table directly. "Excuse me, councilman," I said, my voice hoarse. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm desperate. I haven't eaten in days. Could you help me, please?" Vincent's smile disappeared so fast, it was like watching a mask crack. His eyes darted to the photographer in the corner, then back to me. I could see his mind working, calculating the optics. This isn't," he stammered, then caught himself. His politician's smile returned, but it was strained. "Ma'am, I appreciate you coming to me, but my office hours are for constituent concerns. I can have my assistant give you information about local shelters. I just need food, I interrupted, reaching toward the half-eaten sandwich on his table. Anything. Please. I'm a mother. I have children. Don't touch that. Vincent stood abruptly, his chair scraping back. His voice was louder than necessary, drawing attention from everyone in the cafe. Security! But there was no security here. This was a coffee shop. So Vincent pulled out his phone. My own son. My middle child, who I'd rocked to sleep 1,000 nights, who I'd nursed through pneumonia when he was 7, who I'd helped with college applications and driving lessons and his first campaign for student government. He was calling 911. Yes, hello. I need police at Common Grounds Cafe on 5th Street, he said into his phone, his eyes still on me, like I was a dangerous animal. There's a woman here harassing customers. She's being aggressive. I don't feel safe. Aggressive? I was standing there, trembling, my hand still extended. Vincent, I started, forgetting for a moment that I wasn't supposed to know his name. His eyes narrowed. How do you know my name? Are you stalking me? Is this some kind of setup? The cafe had gone completely silent. Everyone was staring. The photographer was actually taking pictures, which I realized was exactly what Vincent was afraid of. He was doing damage control in real time. I need you to leave, Vincent said firmly, performing for his audience now. I tried to help you politely, but you're being aggressive and making everyone uncomfortable. The police are on their way. I'm not being aggressive, I said, my voice breaking. I'm hungry. I'm just asking for help. Vincent's assistant, a young woman with a tablet, stepped forward. Ma'am, please leave, or we will press charges for trespassing and harassment. I looked at my son one more time, really looked at him, trying to find something in his eyes that remembered me, that remembered being human. But Vincent had already turned away, greeting the next constituent with an apologetic smile, explaining something about how, unfortunately, we get all kinds, with a shrug that made people nod sympathetically. I left before the police arrived. Outside, I sat on a bench 2 blocks away and cried, not pretend crying for the role, real tears, hot and bitter, running through the makeup on my face. My successful sons, the ones I was so proud of, the ones I'd bragged about to my friends, had looked at someone in need and seen only an inconvenience, an embarrassment, trash to be removed. When had they become this? Or had they always been this way, and I'd been too blind to see it? I almost called off the 3rd test. Sitting on that bench, my face streaked with tears and makeup, my stomach actually empty now because I'd been method acting this role all day, I thought, what's the point? 2 out of 3 have already failed. Lucas will probably do the same. And then what? I'll disinherit all of them, and I'll die a bitter old woman who raised monsters. Maybe it was my fault. Maybe I'd been too focused on building the business and not enough on building their character. Maybe I'd given them too much, too easily, and they'd never learned the value of things, the value of people. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Not the emergency phone, but my actual phone, which I'd turned off, but apparently hadn't powered down completely. A reminder notification. Lucas's art show, 7 p.m. tonight. Oh God, I'd completely forgotten. Lucas had mentioned it 3 weeks ago, saying he'd finally gotten a gallery to show some of his pieces. It was a small gallery, he'd said. Nothing fancy, but he was excited. He'd invited me personally, and I'd said I would try to make it. That was before I'd planned this whole experiment. I checked the time, 2:47 p.m. The gallery show was hours away. Lucas would be there preparing, setting up his work. Nervous and hopeful. My failure of a son. My embarrassment. The one I made excuses for at dinner parties. I took the bus again. I was getting quite used to public transportation. To the neighborhood where Lucas lived. It wasn't dangerous exactly, but it was the kind of area where people kept to themselves, where bars had security gates and laundromats were open 24 hours because people worked night shifts. Lucas's apartment was above a bodega. I knew this because I'd visited once, about a year ago, and been privately horrified at the peeling paint and creaky stairs. I'd offered to help him find something better, and he'd politely declined, saying he liked his neighborhood. The rent was cheap, which meant more money for art supplies. At the time, I thought he was being prideful, stubborn, refusing help because he wanted to prove something. Now, standing on his street, I wasn't so sure. I found him in the small park, 2 blocks from his building. Just a pocket park, really. A few benches, some struggling trees, a playground that had seen better days. He was sitting on a bench, eating a sandwich from the bodega, and watching pigeons fight over a piece of bread someone had thrown. He looked tired. His jeans were paint-stained, his jacket worn at the elbows. His hair, my hair color, when mine was still naturally brown, was getting too long, curling at his collar. He needed a haircut. He probably couldn't afford one. I approached slowly, my heart in my throat. This was the moment, the last test, the final sun. "Excuse me," I said softly. Lucas looked up, and for a heart-stopping second, I thought he recognized me. His eyes widened slightly and his lips parted, but then he smiled, a kind, sad smile, and gestured to the bench. "You can sit," he said. "I don't own the park." I sat, keeping some distance between us. We watched the pigeons together for a moment. "Are you hungry?" Lucas asked suddenly. I turned to look at him, and he was holding out half of his sandwich. "I can't," I started. "Please," he interrupted. "I'm serious. I have dinner tonight. I'll be fine. You look like you need this more than me." I stared at the sandwich. It was from the bodega, probably cost $3. Half a cheap sandwich was what my son was offering me. Meanwhile, Christopher probably spent more than that on his morning coffee, and Vincent had left a $15 sandwich barely touched on his table. "You look like my mum," Lucas said, and my heart stopped. "Not exactly," he continued, still holding out the sandwich. "But something about your eyes. She's getting older now, and I worry about her sometimes. She lives in this big house all alone, and I think she's lonely, even though she'd never admit it." He thought I was lonely. He worried about me. "Take it," he said gently. "Please. I know what it's like to be hungry. I've been there." My hands were shaking as I took the sandwich. The paper wrapping crinkled loudly in the quiet park. "Thank you," I whispered. And it was the truest thing I'd said all day. Lucas leaned back on the bench, watching the pigeons again. "I'm Lucas, by the way. What's your name?" I almost said Beatrice. Almost broke character completely, but I caught myself. "Betty," I said. "Close enough." "Betty," he repeated, nodding. "That's a good name. My grandmother was named Betty." We sat in silence for a moment. I held the sandwich, but couldn't bring myself to eat it yet. I was afraid if I tried, I would start crying again, and I wouldn't be able to stop. "Do you have family, Betty?" Lucas asked. "3 sons," I managed to say. "Are they around? Can they help you?" I thought about Christopher calling security, Vincent calling the police. "They're busy," I said. "Successful. Important jobs. They don't have time for an old woman." Lucas frowned, and I saw something flash across his face. Anger? Disappointment? "That's bullshit," he said bluntly, then immediately looked embarrassed. "Sorry, that's just, I don't care how busy someone is. You make time for family. You make time for people who need you. Your mother is lucky to have you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. Lucas laughed, but it was self-deprecating. "She probably doesn't think so. I'm the disappointment of the family. My brothers are this big-shot banker and politician, and I'm a mechanic who plays with clay in my free time." "Art isn't playing," I said automatically. "Tell that to my mum," Lucas said, but he was smiling. "No, that's not fair. She's never said that exactly, but I can see it in her eyes sometimes, when her friends ask what I do. She's embarrassed." The words hit me like a punch to the chest because they were true. He'd seen it. Of course he'd seen it. And he'd never said anything, never confronted me, just kept calling and visiting and cooking me dinner. "Maybe she doesn't understand," I said carefully. "Maybe she measures success the wrong way." "Maybe," Lucas agreed. "But she built this incredible company from nothing. She started with literally nothing, and now she's worth billions. It's hard not to feel like I should have inherited some of that drive, you know? Instead, I can barely pay rent." "Money isn't everything," I said. "No, but it helps," Lucas countered. "I can't even afford to go to my own art show tonight properly. I spent my last $50 on the entry fee for the gallery space. I'll be eating bodega sandwiches for the next week." "You have an art show?" I asked, even though I knew. His face lit up, transforming him. This was my son. This was the real Lucas, the one I'd been missing because I was too focused on his bank account. Yeah, it's nothing major, just a small gallery in the arts district. But they're showing 3 of my sculptures. One of them is of my mum, actually. Her hands. She has these beautiful hands, even though she'd probably tell you they're just old lady hands. But they're hands that built things, that worked, that mattered. I couldn't speak. I literally couldn't form words. You should eat that, Lucas said, nodding at the sandwich still clutched in my hands. Before it gets cold. Well, colder. Bodega sandwiches aren't exactly gourmet. I took a bite. It was turkey and cheese, slightly stale bread, but it was the best thing I'd ever tasted, because my son had given it to me. My son, who had almost nothing, had given me half of what he had. Thank you, I said again. Don't thank me, Lucas said. Just promise me you'll try to find help. There are shelters, food banks. You don't have to do this alone, okay? He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. This is my number. If you need anything, and I mean anything, you call me. I don't have much, but I can probably help with a meal or a warm place to sit for a while. I took the card with trembling hands. It was a simple card, printed cheaply. Lucas Harlow Sculpture Mixed Media, with a phone number and email. Harlow, my name. The name I'd built. The name that opened doors all over the city. And my son was handing his card to a homeless woman in the park, offering help he couldn't really afford to give. I sat with Lucas for another 20 minutes. He told me about his art, about the sculpture of my hands, and what it meant to him. He told me about his brothers, and I heard the love in his voice, even when he talked about their differences. He told me about his mother, and how he wished she understood that he wasn't trying to reject her values. He just had different ones. She thinks I'm failing, he said at one point, but I'm not. I'm just succeeding at something different. I have a job I like. I create things that make people feel emotions. I help my neighbors. I'm there for the people I love. Isn't that enough? It was more than enough. It was everything. When Lucas finally had to leave, he needed to get to the gallery early to set up. He made me promise 3 times that I would call him if I needed anything. He wrote down the names of 2 shelters he knew that were actually decent, and a food bank that didn't ask too many questions. Take care of yourself, Betty, he said, squeezing my shoulder gently. And hey, if you want, come by the gallery tonight. 7 p.m. Riverside Gallery on 4th Street. There'll be free wine and cheese. Not much, but better than nothing, right? He invited a homeless woman to his art show. Of course he did. After he left, I sat on that bench for a long time, watching the sun move across the sky, watching the park empty and fill with different people, parents with kids after school, then teenagers skateboarding, then people walking dogs. I had my answer. I'd known before I even tested Lucas, if I was honest with myself. Some part of me had always known, but I'd needed to see it, to feel it, to understand the depth of the difference between my sons. 2 of them had the world handed to them and thought it made them better than everyone else. One of them had nothing and offered to share it anyway. I called Marcus to pick me up, and as soon as I was in the car, I broke down completely. All the emotions I'd been holding back all day, the humiliation, the heartbreak, the rage, and then finally the overwhelming love I felt for Lucas, came pouring out. Mrs. Harlow? Marcus asked, alarmed, pulling over. What happened? Did someone hurt you? Yes, I sobbed. My sons. 2 of them. They hurt me so badly. Marcus handed me tissues from the glove compartment and waited while I pulled myself together. When I could finally speak again, I told him everything. His face went through a journey of emotions, shock, disgust, and finally, a grim satisfaction when I got to Lucas's part. I knew that boy was special, Marcus said quietly. Always knew it, even when he was little. Remember when he was 8 and he used his allowance to buy flowers for the cleaning staff at Christmas? I did remember. I'd thought it was cute at the time. A phase. It wasn't a phase. It was his character. Take me home, I said. I have a lot of work to do before tomorrow. That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I actually attended Lucas's art show. Not as myself. I was still in disguise, though I'd cleaned up a bit. But I went. The Riverside Gallery was exactly what Lucas had described. Small, intimate, slightly shabby, but full of character. The kind of place real artists showed work before they made it big. There were maybe 30 people there, drinking cheap wine from plastic cups and examining the various pieces. Lucas's sculptures were displayed on pedestals near the back, and there it was, my hands. He'd captured them in bronze, expensive material which meant he'd probably saved for months to afford it. They were positioned as if holding something invisible, something precious. The detail was extraordinary. Every wrinkle, every age spot, every scar from years of work. But the way he'd sculpted them, they weren't old or ugly. They were beautiful, strong, worthy of preservation in metal. The placard next to it read, "Foundation for my mother, who built everything and taught me that real wealth is measured in character, not currency." I stood in front of those bronze hands for the entire show, tears running freely down my face. A young woman approached me at one point, a gallery employee looking concerned. "Ma'am, are you all right? Can I get you anything?" "I'm his mother," I whispered. She looked confused. Of course she did. I looked nothing like Beatrice Harlow, society matriarch. "I'm his mother," I repeated louder this time. "And I've been a fool." The next morning, I sent a text from my real phone to all 3 of my sons. "Family meeting. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. at the house. Non-negotiable. Do not be late." Then I spent the entire day with my lawyers. By the time I went to bed that night, everything was prepared. The new will, the trust restructuring, the transfer of company shares, the letters I'd written to each of my sons, explaining my decision, and the video footage. Because yes, I'd worn a hidden camera, a tiny thing, clipped inside my coat, that Marcus had helped me acquire. It had recorded everything. Christopher calling me trash, Vincent calling the police, Lucas sharing his sandwich. I'd watched the footage 3 times, and each time it was like being stabbed in the heart. But I needed to see it. Needed to be sure I wasn't letting emotion cloud my judgment. I wasn't. If anything, I hadn't been emotional enough. I'd been so focused on success, on what my sons achieved, what they earned, what they owned, that I'd failed to ask the most important question: what kind of human beings were they? Now I knew, and I was about to show them the answer. The next morning, I woke at dawn and took a long time getting ready. The real Beatrice this time. I dressed in a Chanel suit, navy blue, classic, the kind of armor I wore to board meetings. I did my makeup carefully, covering any trace of yesterday's disguise. I put on my jewelry, the diamond earrings my late husband had given me on our 10th anniversary, the Cartier watch, the simple platinum band I still wore on my right hand. I looked like a CEO. I looked like a billionaire. I looked like someone you didn't cross. Perfect. Christopher arrived first, at 9:47 a.m., because he was never late for anything that might affect his inheritance. He kissed me on the cheek, a dry, obligatory peck, and immediately started asking questions. "What's this about, Mother? I had to reschedule 3 meetings. Is something wrong? Are you sick?" "I'm fine," I said coolly. "We'll discuss it when everyone's here." Vincent arrived at 9:59 a.m., cutting it close as always. He had that politician's smile plastered on, and he hugged me a bit too enthusiastically for the cameras he probably imagined were always recording. "Mother, you look wonderful. I'm so glad you called us together. I actually have some exciting campaign news I wanted to share with everyone. Later." I cut him off. Lucas arrived at 10:03, slightly late, slightly frazzled. He'd probably taken the bus here, I realized. He probably couldn't afford an Uber from his neighborhood. Sorry, he said, hurrying into the sitting room where we'd gathered. The bus was running behind, and then I couldn't find parking. He stopped, looking around at his brothers, then at me. "What's going on? Is everything okay?" "Sit down," I said. "All of you." Something in my tone made them obey immediately. They arranged themselves on the sofa and chairs facing me, Christopher on the left, Vincent in the middle, Lucas on the right. My 3 sons, my 3 very different sons. "I'm stepping down as CEO of Harlow Industries," I began. "As you know, I've been considering this for some time. I'm 75 years old. It's time." Christopher leaned forward, unable to hide his eagerness. Vincent's politician face stayed neutral, but I saw his hands grip the armrests. Lucas just looked sad, like he was losing something, not gaining. The company will go to one of you, I continued, along with the majority of my estate. The others will receive a standard inheritance, 10 million each, but the bulk of everything goes to one son, the house, the properties, the controlling shares of Harlow Industries, the investment portfolio, approximately $2.8 billion in total assets. The room was so silent, I could hear them breathing. Before I tell you my decision, I need to show you something. I picked up the remote and turned on the large television mounted above the fireplace. I'd queued up the video myself that morning. Yesterday, I said, pressing play, I conducted an experiment. The video began with footage of me in the bathroom, applying the disguise. I heard Vincent gasp. Christopher made a strangled sound. What is this? Christopher demanded. Mother. What? Watch, I said sharply. They watched in silence as the video showed me approaching Christopher's building. They watched me beg for help. They watched Christopher call security and order them to get this trash away from my car. The color drained from Christopher's face. The video continued to the cafe. Vincent calling the police. Vincent telling them I was aggressive. Vincent letting his assistant threaten me with trespassing charges. Vincent stood up. Mother, I can explain. Sit down. He sat. Finally, the video showed Lucas in the park, sharing his sandwich, offering his phone number, inviting me to his art show. When the video ended, I turned off the television and looked at my 3 sons. Lucas's eyes were wet. He understood. I could tell. He understood what I'd done and why. Christopher looked furious. This is insane. You can't judge us based on some twisted test. We didn't know it was you. Exactly, I said softly. You didn't know it was me. So you showed me who you really are. I was protecting my property, Christopher protested. That's just good security. You don't know what kinds of people approach me. I know exactly what kinds of people, I interrupted. Hungry people, desperate people, people who have fallen on hard times and need help. And your response is to call them trash and have them removed. I turned to Vincent. And you, a public servant, a man who claims to represent all his constituents. You called the police on a woman asking for food. Mother, you have to understand the optics. Vincent started. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said, my voice hard. I understand that your image is more important to you than basic human decency. This isn't fair. Christopher was on his feet now. You're judging us for one moment, one interaction. You can't throw away everything we've achieved because of this. Can't I? I asked. This is my company, my money, my legacy, and I'll give it to whomever I choose. I walked over to Lucas, who was still sitting, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Lucas, I said gently, stand up. He stood, looking confused and slightly afraid. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope, thick, legal-sized, with the Harlow Industries logo embossed on it. This is for you, I said, handing it to him. He took it with shaking hands. What is this? Open it. Lucas broke the seal and pulled out the documents inside. I watched his eyes scan the first page, then widen in shock. I don't understand, he whispered. It's all there, I said. The company shares, the house, the investment portfolio, everything. It's yours now. You're the new CEO of Harlow Industries, effective immediately. The room exploded. You can't be serious, Christopher roared. He doesn't know the first thing about— You can't be serious, Christopher roared. He doesn't know the first thing about running a company. He's a mechanic. He's nobody. He's your brother, I said coldly, and he's worth more than both of you combined. Vincent was making choking sounds, his political composure finally shattering. Mother, please, think about this rationally. Lucas isn't prepared for this kind of responsibility. He doesn't have the education, the experience. He has something more important, I interrupted. He has character. He has compassion. He has the ability to see other people as human beings instead of obstacles or photo opportunities. I turned back to Christopher and Vincent, and I felt years of disappointment finally crystallizing into perfect, cold clarity. I raised you with every advantage, I said. The best schools, the best opportunities. I gave you everything. hoping it would help you build good lives. But somewhere along the way, you learned the wrong lessons. You learned that money makes you better than other people, that success justifies cruelty, that the value of a human being is measured by their bank account. That's not fair, Vincent said, his voice breaking. We're successful because we worked hard. No, I cut him off. You're successful because I worked hard, because I built something and gave it to you, and you took those gifts and turned into entitled, heartless men who look down on everyone you consider beneath you. I walked to my desk and pulled out 2 more envelopes, thinner ones. Christopher, Vincent, you will each receive $10 million. That's more than most people see in a lifetime. Use it wisely, or don't. I honestly don't care anymore. I handed them their envelopes. Christopher snatched his face purple with rage. Vincent took his with shaking hands, tears actually running down his cheeks. You're making a mistake, Christopher said, his voice low and dangerous. You're handing a multi-billion-dollar company to someone who doesn't even have a business degree. The board will never accept this. Our shareholders, the board answers to me, I said. Or rather, they will now answer to Lucas. I own controlling shares, and those shares are now his. As for the shareholders, they'll be satisfied when they see the transition plan I've prepared. Lucas will have advisors, mentors, but he'll learn, just like I learned, just like anyone can learn if they're willing to work hard and stay humble. This is about that sandwich, isn't it? Christopher said bitterly. He gave you a sandwich, and now he gets billions. That's insane. That's not how the world works. No, I agreed. It's not how the world works, but it's how my world works. It's my money, and I'll give it to someone who understands that kindness matters, that character matters, that the measure of a man isn't what he has, but what he does when someone needs help. Lucas still hadn't spoken. He was holding the documents, tears running down his face. Mom, he finally said, I can't. This is too much. It's exactly right, I said firmly. And you're going to be wonderful. Not because you know business, you'll learn that, but because you know people, because you know what it's like to struggle, because you haven't forgotten where we came from. I turned back to Christopher and Vincent one more time. You're my sons, and I love you. I'll always love you, but I don't like who you've become. And until I see evidence that you're willing to change, willing to remember that everyone deserves basic human dignity, I don't want you in my life or in this company. You're cutting us off? Vincent asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm giving you exactly what you need, I said. $10 million and a chance to figure out what kind of men you want to be, without my money protecting you, without my name opening doors. You want to prove you're successful? Prove it on your own. Christopher threw his envelope on the floor. This is bullshit. We'll contest the will. We'll sue. We have lawyers. Better lawyers than mine, I asked, raising an eyebrow. I've been in business for 50 years. Every document is airtight. You'll lose, and you'll look petty doing it. But by all means, try. It'll make it much easier for me to cut you off completely. That stopped him. Vincent was crying openly now, his politician's mask completely shattered. Please, Mother. I'm sorry. I didn't know it was you. If I'd known, that's exactly the problem, I said softly. You would have helped me if you knew I was rich and powerful, but you called the police on a woman who needed help because she was poor and powerless. Don't you see? That's why you failed the test. Christopher left without another word, grabbing his envelope from the floor and storming out. I heard his Porsche peel out of the driveway moments later, tires squealing. Vincent lingered, trying to salvage something. He apologized. He explained. He promised to do better, to volunteer at shelters, to change his position on the homeless ordinance. I listened patiently, then said, Vincent, stop. He stopped mid-sentence. I know you're sorry, I said, and maybe you'll actually make those changes. I hope you do. But this decision is final. You have $10 million and a chance to prove you're the man you claim to be. Show me through your actions, not your words. Will you ever forgive me? He asked, his voice small. I don't know, I said honestly. Right now, I'm too disappointed to think about forgiveness. Come back in a year. Show me what you've done with your second chance. Then we'll talk." He nodded and left, shoulders slumped, all his polish and perfection stripped away. And then it was just Lucas and me. "I can't do this," Lucas said, still holding the documents. "Mum, I can't run a company. I don't know how." "Neither did I when I started," I said, sitting down next to him. "I was a cleaning woman, but I learned, and you'll learn." "But Christopher's right. I don't have a business degree. I don't have experience." "You have something better," I interrupted. "You have empathy. You have the ability to see people, really see them. Do you know how rare that is? Especially in business." I took his hands, my hands, the ones he'd immortalized in bronze, and held them tightly. "I made a mistake raising your brothers," I said. "I gave them everything and taught them that success meant accumulation, money, power, status. But I forgot to teach them the most important lesson, that none of that matters if you lose your humanity." "You didn't make a mistake with them," Lucas said. "They made their own choices." "Maybe," I allowed, "but I enabled those choices. I was so proud of their achievements that I didn't ask what they sacrificed to achieve them. I didn't notice when they stopped caring about other people." I squeezed his hands. "But you never stopped caring, even when it cost you, even when it meant staying poor while your brothers got rich, even when it meant being the embarrassment of the family." "I was never embarrassed of you," Lucas said quickly. "Yes, you were," I said gently. "I saw it in your eyes every time you introduced me to someone, every time you apologized for me. And you know what? I deserved it, because I was measuring your worth by the wrong standards." Tears were rolling down my face now, and I didn't bother wiping them away. "That sculpture," I said, "the one of my hands, it broke my heart and healed it at the same time, because you saw me, the real me, the woman who built things, who worked, who mattered, not because of the money, but because of what those hands represented." "Foundation," Lucas whispered, echoing the title of his piece. "Yes," I said. "You understood that everything I built was worthless if it didn't rest on the right foundation. And the foundation isn't money. It's character. It's kindness. It's the willingness to share your sandwich, even when it's the last one you can afford." Lucas pulled me into a hug, and we sat there for a long time, holding each other. "I'm scared," he finally admitted. "Good," I said. "Fear will keep you humble. Fear will keep you asking questions and listening to people who know more than you. Your brothers were never afraid. And look what happened." I pulled back and looked at him seriously. "You're going to make mistakes. Big ones, probably. But I trust you to make them for the right reasons. And I'll be here to help. This isn't me abandoning you with the company. This is me passing it on to someone who I know will use it to do good in the world." "What if I fail?" Lucas asked. "Then you fail," I said simply. "But you'll fail trying to do the right thing. That's more than I can say for your brothers." Over the next weeks, I watched my decision ripple out through the world. The business community was shocked when the announcement went out. Lucas Harlow, previously unknown, was taking over Harlow Industries. The stock price dipped immediately, investors nervous about the untested CEO. But I'd prepared for this. I'd assembled a team of advisors and mentors for Lucas, people I trusted who understood both business and ethics. I'd created a transition plan that would see me staying on as a consultant for the first year, and I'd written a letter to the shareholders explaining my decision. I didn't mention the test. I didn't tell them about Christopher calling me trash or Vincent calling the police. That was private, family business. Instead, I wrote about values, about long-term thinking, about how the companies that would survive the next 50 years wouldn't be the ones focused purely on profit, but the ones that understood their responsibility to their communities, their employees, their world. I wrote about Lucas's background. Yes, he was a sculptor, but he'd also worked as a mechanic, which meant he understood the frontline workers who actually kept our facilities running. He'd lived on a tight budget, which meant he understood the customers who used our products. He'd created art, which meant he understood the importance of beauty and meaning in work, not just efficiency. I wrote, "My son Lucas may not have the traditional credentials you'd expect in a CEO, but he has something more valuable, the ability to see people as people, not just numbers on a spreadsheet. He has empathy, integrity, and a genuine desire to build something meaningful. These are the qualities that will guide Harlow Industries into the future. The stock price recovered within a week. Christopher didn't speak to me for 6 months. When he finally did reach out, it was through his lawyer, asking about some technicality in his trust fund. I had my lawyer respond with the information and a message. When you're ready to talk to me as your mother, not as a source of money, call me yourself. He didn't call. Vincent, to his credit, did make changes. He withdrew his name from consideration for the congressional race, saying he wanted to focus on local issues. He started volunteering at a homeless shelter. At first, I cynically assumed it was for publicity, but the shelter director told me he came every week, sometimes without cameras, and did actual work, serving food, talking to people, listening to their stories. I don't know if it was genuine transformation or performance. Maybe Vincent didn't know either, but at least he was trying. Lucas, meanwhile, threw himself into learning the business. He spent 12-hour days studying financials, meeting with department heads, visiting our facilities to talk to workers. And he made changes, small ones at first, then bigger. He increased the minimum wage for all Harlow Industries employees to $20 an hour, citing his own experience living on low wages. The board protested. It would cut into profits. Lucas told them he didn't care and reminded them that he had controlling shares. He implemented a program where 5% of the company's annual profits would go to community development projects in neighborhoods where our facilities operated, food banks, shelters, youth programs. He created an advisory board made up of workers from all levels of the company, janitors, warehouse staff, office workers, who would report directly to him about working conditions and concerns. The business analysts called him naive, said he was running the company like a charity, said he'd bankrupt us within 5 years. But something interesting happened. Employee turnover dropped to almost nothing. When people feel valued, they stay. They work harder. They care about the product. Our facilities became the cleanest, most efficient in the industry because the workers took pride in them, because they weren't just earning a paycheck anymore. They were part of something that treated them with dignity. And customers noticed. In an age where people increasingly want to support ethical companies, Harlow Industries became the gold standard. Our sales actually increased. Within a year, the stock price was higher than it had ever been under my leadership. Lucas proved everyone wrong by refusing to play by the old rules. Christopher finally called me on my 76th birthday. "Happy birthday, Mother," he said, his voice stiff. "Thank you, Christopher." Silence. "I'm sorry," he finally said, "for what I did, for calling you trash, for not recognizing, even if it wasn't you. I should have helped." "Yes," I agreed. "You should have. I've been thinking about it a lot, about who I became, and I don't like it." "Then change," I said simply. "It's not that easy." "Yes, it is," I countered. "It's the easiest thing in the world. You just start making different choices, one choice at a time." Another silence. "Lucas is doing well," Christopher said, and I heard something in his voice. Not quite admiration, but no longer dismissal either. "He is. I underestimated him." "You did?" "I underestimated what matters," Christopher continued. I thought success was everything. But Lucas is successful, and he's happy. I'm successful, and I'm miserable." My heart cracked open a little. "Christopher," I said gently, "you can be happy, but you have to decide what kind of person you want to be, what legacy you want to leave." "I don't know how," he admitted, and he sounded like a little boy. "Start by helping someone who can't do anything for you in return," I said. "Don't make a big deal of it. Don't tell anyone. Just help, because it's the right thing to do, and see how you feel." "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay, I'll try. That's all I ask." Before we hung up, Christopher said, "Mother, I love you." "I love you too," I said. "I always have, even when I don't like you." He laughed, a small, broken sound, but a laugh nonetheless. "It's been 2 years now since the test. Lucas is still CEO of Harlow Industries, and the company is thriving in ways I never imagined. He's taken my foundation and built something even stronger, a company that proves you don't have to sacrifice ethics for profits. Vincent is still a city councilman, but he's different now. more genuine. He pushed through legislation to fund homeless services, and he actually follows up, visiting the programs to see how they work. We have dinner once a month, and slowly, we're rebuilding trust. Christopher took early retirement from investment banking. He volunteers with a financial literacy program, teaching low-income families how to budget and save. We talk on the phone every Sunday now. It's awkward sometimes, but we're learning how to be mother and son again, not just CEO and heir. And me? I'm finally retired. Really retired. I spend my days in my garden or visiting Lucas at the office, where he keeps my sculpture of hands on his desk, or working with the 3 charitable foundations I've set up with my personal money. I also volunteer at a soup kitchen every Tuesday. I serve food to people who remind me of Betty, the character I played for a day, people who have fallen on hard times, people who just need someone to see them as human. Sometimes, people recognize me. "Aren't you Beatrice Harlow?" they ask. "Yes," I say. "But right now, I'm just Betty, and I'm here to help. Would you like some soup?" Last week, Lucas got married to a lovely woman he met at an art gallery. She's a teacher, passionate about her work, completely uninterested in money. At the wedding, all 3 of my sons were there. Christopher and Vincent stood as groomsmen, alongside Lucas's artist friends and the mechanics from the shop where he used to work. During his speech, Lucas thanked me for everything, for raising him, for believing in him, for teaching him what really matters. But then he said something that made me cry. "My mother taught me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the lives you touch, the kindness you show, the person you choose to be when no one's watching." She tested us to see if we'd learned that lesson. 2 of us failed, but she didn't give up on us. She gave us a chance to learn it again, the hard way. Lucas looked at his brothers, and they looked back with a mixture of regret and gratitude. "Christopher, Vincent, you're here today, not because Mom forced you to come, but because you chose to, because you're becoming the men she always hoped you'd be, and that means everything." Christopher was crying. Vincent was crying. I was definitely crying. Later, at the reception, all 3 of my sons danced with me, not because it was expected, but because they wanted to. And as I moved around that dance floor, held by each of my boys, I thought about the woman I was 2 years ago, the woman who had everything and was terrified she'd raised monsters. I didn't raise monsters. I raised flawed human beings who got lost for a while. But the beautiful thing about being lost is that you can always find your way back, if you're willing to try. Wealth exposes who you really are. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder to stay humble. And tell me in the comments, if you were in my shoes, would you have forgiven the other 2 sons? Let me know. Sometimes people ask me if I regret the test, if I wish I'd just trusted my sons to do the right thing. I don't regret it for a second. Because the test wasn't about catching them doing something wrong. It was about showing them who they'd become. It was about holding up a mirror and forcing them to look at themselves honestly. You can't change what you don't acknowledge. Christopher and Vincent had to see themselves through the eyes of someone powerless before they could understand how they'd been using their power. They had to feel the sting of their own cruelty reflected back at them. And Lucas? Lucas had to see that his mother finally understood, that she recognized his worth, that kindness isn't weakness, it's strength. The test wasn't perfect. It was manipulative, maybe even cruel, but it was necessary. Because at 75 years old, I was running out of time to fix my mistakes. I'd built an empire, but I'd nearly failed at the most important thing, raising good human beings. The test gave us all a second chance. There's a follow-up to this story that I want to share. A coda that happened just last month. I was at the soup kitchen, serving my usual Tuesday shift, when a man approached the counter. He was well-dressed, out of place in the line of people waiting for food. "Mrs. Harlow," he said. I looked up. I didn't recognize him. "I'm David," he said. "You probably don't remember me. You gave me some change about 2 years ago, outside a parking garage." My heart stopped. I remembered. He was the young man who'd passed me that day when I was testing Christopher, the one who'd tossed coins at my feet without looking at me. "I remember," I said carefully. "I saw what you did," David continued, "after you left. I was curious about why an old homeless woman had a hidden camera, so I followed you. I saw you get into a Mercedes. I looked you up. I figured out what you were doing. Oh God. Had my test been exposed this whole time? I never told anyone, David said quickly, seeing my face. That's not why I'm here. I'm here because watching you changed my life. What? I was that guy, David said, his voice thick with emotion. The guy who throws change without looking. The guy who complains about homeless people being bad for business. I was exactly like your older son. Maybe worse. He took a deep breath. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. About how I'd walked past you like you were invisible. About how I probably did that 10 times a day and never noticed. So I started noticing, really looking at people, really seeing them. Tears were running down his face now. I quit my job in finance. I went back to school for social work. I just graduated last month. And I start a job next week at a homeless advocacy organization. Because of you. Because you showed me what I was becoming. I couldn't speak. I just reached across the counter and took his hands. Thank you, I finally managed. Thank you for telling me. No, David said. Thank you. You didn't just test your sons that day. You tested me too. And I failed. But you gave me the chance to see it, to understand it, to change it. He smiled through his tears. I'm here to volunteer, if you'll have me. We'd be honored, I said. That's the thing about kindness and cruelty. They ripple out. They touch people you'll never meet, in ways you'll never know. When Christopher called me trash, he didn't just hurt me. He reinforced his own worldview that people without money don't matter. And every person who heard him learned that lesson too. When Vincent called the police on a hungry woman, he didn't just betray his values. He taught everyone watching that protecting your image is more important than protecting vulnerable people. But when Lucas shared his sandwich, he didn't just feed me. He reminded himself, and everyone around him, that we're all human, that we all deserve dignity, that small acts of kindness matter. And David, a stranger, saw that kindness, and it changed the entire trajectory of his life. That's the real legacy, not the company, not the money, not the empire I built. The legacy is how you treat people when you have nothing to gain. The legacy is the ripples. My grandfather used to tell me a story when I was little. He was a janitor at a school, and he'd say, Beatrice, you can tell a lot about a person by how they treat the janitor, because the janitor can't do anything for them. So if they're kind to the janitor, you know it's real kindness. If they're dismissive, you know they're only kind when it benefits them. I thought about that story a lot during those 2 years, how I'd built this massive corporation, how I'd amassed billions of dollars, how I'd become someone important, but I'd forgotten my grandfather's lesson. I'd forgotten that character is revealed in how you treat people who can't do anything for you. That's what the test measured. Not business acumen or political savvy or even intelligence. It measured humanity, and only one of my sons passed. But the beautiful thing, the thing that gives me hope even now, is that the others are learning. Slowly, painfully, but learning. Christopher still volunteers every week. He told me last month that he's been helping a formerly homeless man prepare for job interviews. I never knew their stories, Christopher said. I never asked. Everyone has a story, Mum. Everyone. Vincent pushed through a bill to increase funding for mental health services and addiction treatment. Not because it polls well, it actually doesn't, but because he met people in the shelters who needed help, and he couldn't look away anymore. They're not perfect. They still make mistakes. They still sometimes fall back into old patterns, but they're trying, and that's what matters. Lucas asked me recently why I didn't tell more people about what I did, why I kept the test private, a family secret. Because I didn't do it to shame anyone, I said. I did it to teach, and shame isn't a good teacher. Shame just makes people defensive. So you never wanted to expose Christopher and Vincent? No, I said firmly. I wanted to save them. I wanted to show them who they were becoming before it was too late to change. Lucas nodded, understanding. It was an act of love. Yes, I agreed. The hardest kind. The kind that risks everything, because you love someone too much to let them stay lost. I think about that day a lot. The day I put on the disguise and stepped out of my comfortable life into the uncomfortable reality of being invisible. It was terrifying and humbling and necessary. Because until you experience powerlessness, you can't fully understand how you use your power. Until you're dismissed and ignored and treated like trash, you can't fully appreciate how your words and actions affect others. Until you're hungry and desperate and begging for help, you can't fully comprehend the courage it takes to ask for help. I needed to feel all of that, not just to test my sons, but to test myself. And I failed too, in my own way. I failed by raising sons who thought money made them better than other people. I failed by not teaching them early enough that character matters more than a bank account. But I got a second chance. We all got a second chance, and we're using it. Last week, I got a letter from a woman I've never met. She wrote, "Mrs. Harlow, I don't know if you'll remember me, but I was sitting in the cafe when your son called the police on you. I watched the whole thing happen. I didn't know it was you then. I just knew it was wrong, but I was too afraid to speak up, too afraid to challenge a city councilman, too afraid to be seen as causing a scene." The letter continued, "I've regretted my silence ever since, so I've decided to be braver. Last month, I saw a man harassing a homeless woman at a bus stop, and instead of looking away, instead of staying silent, I intervened. I told him to stop. I called the bus driver to help. I sat with the woman until she felt safe." She ended the letter. "Thank you for teaching me that silence in the face of cruelty makes us complicit. I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to be brave." I keep that letter in my desk drawer, next to Lucas's business card, next to a photo from his wedding, next to a clay figurine Christopher made for me last Christmas. His first attempt at art, rough and unpracticed, but made with love. These are my treasures now. Not the corporate awards, or the gala invitations, or the society page mentions. These small, imperfect, beautiful pieces of evidence that people can change, that love can redeem, that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. If you're reading this and wondering what you would have done in my place, I'll tell you. I hope you never have to find out. I hope you raise children who are kind automatically, who see people as people without needing to be tested, who share their sandwich without thinking twice. But if you do find yourself where I was, watching your children become people you don't recognize, seeing them value money over humanity, I hope you have the courage to do something about it. Not necessarily what I did, maybe something gentler, or maybe something even harder, but something. Because the greatest failure isn't raising children who struggle financially, it's raising children who succeed at everything except being decent human beings. I'm 77 now. I probably have 10, maybe 15 good years left if I'm lucky, and I spend those years differently than I thought I would. I thought retirement would be golf and travel and charity galas, where I write big checks and get my photo taken. Instead, I serve soup on Tuesdays. I garden. I visit Lucas at work and argue with him about corporate policy. He usually wins. I have dinner with Vincent and listen to him talk about the people he's met, the lives he's touched. I talk to Christopher about the man he's helping, and I hear the pride in my son's voice when he says, "He got the job, Mum. He starts next week. This is wealth. This is legacy. Not the buildings with my name on them or the endowments or the corporate empire. These moments, these transformations, these ripples spreading out into the world." Someone asked me at a charity event last month, "Mrs. Harlow, what's your greatest achievement?" Everyone expected me to say the company, or maybe the philanthropic foundations, or the billions I'd made. I looked at Lucas, standing across the room, talking to a janitor, making the man laugh, treating him like the most important person there. "My greatest achievement," I said, "is raising a son who shares his sandwich." The person who asked looked confused. They wanted a real answer, a serious answer. But that was my serious answer. That was everything. The test was never really about the sandwich. It was about seeing someone in need and recognizing yourself in them. It was about understanding that there but for the grace of God go I. It was about empathy, about humanity, about the basic recognition that we're all in this together. Christopher failed because he saw a homeless woman and saw trash, something to be removed, something that diminished him by proximity. Vincent failed because he saw a homeless woman and saw risk, a potential scandal, a threat to his carefully constructed image. Lucas passed because he saw a homeless woman and saw his mother, saw a human being, saw someone who deserved the same dignity and kindness he'd want for himself. That's the test we're all taking every day, whether we realize it or not. How do you treat the person who can do nothing for you? What do you do when no one's watching? Who are you when there's nothing to gain from being good? I'll end with this. Last month was Thanksgiving, and for the first time in years, all three of my sons came to dinner. They brought their families. They helped cook. They told stories and laughed and argued about politics and sports and whether my stuffing recipe needed more sage. It was normal, beautifully, perfectly normal. At one point, I looked around the table, at Christopher teaching Vincent's daughter how to carve the turkey, at Vincent telling Lucas's wife about a community program he was excited about, at Lucas sketching something on a napkin for Christopher's son, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Not because everything was perfect. My sons still had flaws. They still made mistakes. They still sometimes struggled with the lessons I'd tried to teach them. But they were trying. They were growing. They were becoming better versions of themselves. Before dinner, we went around the table, saying what we were grateful for. When it came to Christopher, he said, "I'm grateful for second chances." Vincent said, "I'm grateful for hard lessons." Lucas said, "I'm grateful for a mother who loved us enough to show us the truth, even when it hurt." And me? I was grateful for all of it. The test, the failure, the transformation, the hope. I was grateful that I'd been brave enough to risk everything. My relationship with my sons, their respect, their love, because I valued their character more than their approval. I was grateful that money hadn't been the end of our story. It had been a tool, a test, a revealer of truth, but it wasn't the point. The point was always love, hard love, demanding love, love that refuses to accept less than you're capable of being. So if you're reading this and wondering whether you should subscribe to this channel, whether this story meant something to you, I'll tell you what I told my sons. Character matters more than a bank account. Success means nothing if you lose your humanity. The measure of a person is how they treat those who can do nothing for them. And it's never too late to change. Never too late to be better. Never too late to choose kindness over cruelty, generosity over greed, humanity over profit. My name is Beatrice Harlow. I built an empire from nothing, but my greatest accomplishment will always be the day my son gave a stranger half his sandwich, because that's the day I knew I finally taught him what really matters. And that's worth more than all the billions in the world.